Lionel Shriver, the author who was brought out to Australia by the Centre for Independent Studies, where she gave some terrific speeches. Now, Lionel Shriver's written many books. We need to talk about Kevin and other books which have been turned into movies, very popular. But one of the key things that she has fought against is what's called cultural appropriation, which is this idea that you are not allowed to, as a writer, write about things that you can't experience, which is complete insanity. She's also railed against what Rita was just talking about, the way words are being manipulated by the left. I had a chat to Lionel Shriver last week. Let's have a listen. Lionel Shriver, you have just been to Byron Bay. You vowed you would never come back to Australia 3 years ago. What brought you back?
Well, I'm obviously changeable, as women used to be able to be all the time. So, it wasn't a hard and fast vow not to come back.
Excellent. So you've been at the Centre for Independent Studies Concilium up in Byron Bay, speaking about that. Terrific. It's very good of them to bring you out here. Last time you came out was the Brisbane Writers' Festival, which gained notoriety for you and also for Yasmin Abdel-Magid, who stormed out on you.
Yes.
Yes, but you'll be delighted to know she didn't only storm out of your lecture, she stormed out of Australia because she got so much...
Yeah, but she followed me.
Oh, she follows your...
She's now in London.
Well, she's hoping for more of it to rub off all that notoriety. Now, that instance, you were rightly speaking about fiction and the need for fiction writers to be able to basically put themselves
write whatever
in.
they want.
Exactly.
Which has become an extreme position.
And how did it become an extreme position?
Well, I'm not entirely sure where it first cropped up, but there was this notion that originally was making people hysterical in the fashion industry of all places, when a white model wanted to wear dreadlocks, or some designer had a kimono type theme, and it was called cultural appropriation. And back in 2016, when I gave the speech in Brisbane, this was not a household word, and I had to explain what it was in the speech. It had been applied to fiction very little, and it was difficult for me to find any examples to fill out the speech. And my biggest worry about that lecture was that I would bore the pants off the audience. I'm always worried about that. Because what I was saying was so self-evident, which is, I mean, this taboo against stealing from other cultures without permission, I don't know how you're supposed to get it, is a complete nightmare for a fiction writer. Fiction writers are thieves by their very nature, you know. We steal from everywhere, and it's one of those nice kinds of stealing that you get to keep what we took.
Exactly.
So it's like the perfect life, right? But, you know, fiction writers have to be able to speak with different voices and from different points of view. And if we're not going to have books that exercise a kind of effective apartheid, then and we're going to reflect Western life as it is currently conducted, then we need to be able to have as we now call it, a diverse cast. And this cultural appropriation taboo puts especially white writers in an untenable position. We're not supposed to, you know, borrow a couple of sugar without asking, but on the other hand, that means that we have all white casts, and you can't win. You've written some terrific books, best-selling author. We Need to Talk About Kevin is obviously the most famous one, great movie with Tilda Swinton. We Need to Talk About Kevin got a lot of free publicity here for a couple of years when our Prime Minister was called Kevin. And every letter headline was, we need to talk about Kevin. Yeah.
Exactly. So people were surprised when they saw the film. Fantastic film, great book. You've also written The Mandibles. You've also written Big Brother, a very personal story about your elder brother who was obese. Now, all these, particularly The Mandibles, which has a big wall, which is a brilliant idea, where it is the Mexicans who have put the wall up to stop America, which is, in your novel, collapsed. Americans pouring into Mexico. And you claim Donald Trump stole your idea.
Yes, he did, because I wrote that before he started running for president.
He thought, what a great idea.
Actually, I'm very impressed. It means that Donald Trump has actually read a book.
Absolutely, and it's one of yours. Now, but at what point, what is fiction? So what is creative fiction?
Well, you stopped me in my tracks. I'm not sure I've ever asked myself that question exactly. I think it's up to the fiction writer what fiction is, what it's for. I think that's what I'm trying to preserve for everyone, is the right to shape the medium to your whim. It is a form ultimately without limits, which people are now trying to impose limits on. A lot of my books do have a topical element. You know, yes, I have taken on obesity and the mandibles. I look at the collapse of the dollar in the United States. It's actually all about economics. In the book I'm going to release in this coming spring, it's about the cult of exercise.
Right.
So, you know, so I tend to hit a number of cultural obsessions. That's not a requirement of the form. It just happens to be what interests me. Yeah. And I think fiction is capable of taking on some of these difficult subjects with a lot more nuance, if only by containing contradictions, which nonfiction has understandably a bigger problem with, and coming at issues from many different angles and points of view so that you get more dimension. And frankly, I mean, maybe it's just me, but I find fiction a lot more fun to read.
Exactly. And is this the problem? Are the left so scared of you? Because the reality is the left have become very scared of you. You write columns in The Spectator on many different topics.
Well, that may be flattering me. They sure don't act scared of me.
Well, are they scared of your talent? And is this why the limiting of your, the pressure against you, oh, you can't write about this, you can't write about this, is because they're scared of your talent?
I think part of the problem is that the literary community, and I use that expression with scare quotes.
Exactly. I agree with you.
The literary community has become strangely homogeneous in its ideological makeup. And therefore I am something of an outlier. And I find this dismaying because time was that people who were attracted to writing, and especially literary writing, tended to be mavericks. They were people who didn't fit in with ordinary life. They were often misfits. They were often rebellious, you know. And now the current crop of fiction writers seems strangely obedient, conformist, and groupthink oriented.
Is this war by, well, let's call them the left, or the hard left, whatever you like, on literature? It hasn't stopped there. It's on creativity in general. You've written about, for example, the murals at the university in San Francisco. Beautiful set of murals.
Have you seen them online?
I've seen them since reading your article in The Spectator.
They're beautiful, aren't they?
Absolutely
It's not just my opinion.
Fabulous.
It's really great art.
It's great art, and these amazing murals tell the story of George Washington, warts and all, slaves, there are dead Indians, there's all sorts of stuff. So it's a warts and all thing. It's not a glowing portrait. Yet the left in San Francisco, the left they wanted to...
They initially wanted to paint it over, right, which would destroy them forever. The mural was painted by a committed communist, and it was the fruit of FDR's Works Progress Administration, which was also, you know, very left-wing. The new part of the New Deal was, in some ways, the beginning of the current incarnation of the American left. So it's all on their side. They're destroying their own art. It's not some kind of right-wing, you know, Nazi mural. They're destroying art that supports their own point of view, and that I actually just find that befuddling.
It's scary as well, though, isn't it? Because once we start silencing the artists, so we're silencing artists, we're silencing writers, We were talking earlier about the Edinburgh Fringe Festival where they're silencing comedians. We see that a lot around Australia. In fact, comedian used to mean someone who was funny.
Yeah,
it doesn't
not
mean that
anymore.
No, it means someone who just spouts leftist rubbish. At what point do artists fight back? And are you the figurehead to lead that fight? Because it seems to have landed in your lap.
Well, this is not a role that I have gone seeking. It's more a matter of, everyone raise your hand who wants to preserve freedom of speech and freedom of artistic expression. And I raise my hand and I look around me and nobody else is on it.
Everyone's looking at their iPhones, going, oh, sorry.
And, this is a matter of self-interest to me. I mean, I'm trying to preserve the... what I need to pursue my occupation, and what all of my colleagues need, and that's why I find it so perplexing that I don't get more support from fellow writers, even writers who may not share exactly my political beliefs. But freedom of speech, it belongs to everybody, and it isn't a right or a left-wing issue, and both the left has allowed itself to relinquish the importance of freedom of speech. They embrace an idea of freedom of speech, which means that all it is permission to speak atrocities.
Right.
Permission to be bigoted in public.
There we go, Lionel Shriver.
On a cheerful note.
Thanks so much for coming on Outsiders.
It's my pleasure.